What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 27 of the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm joined here with Adam Childs.
What's up, Kieren?
Hey,
I'm not going to say it, bro. I was almost going to be like, whoa, 27 episodes.
We're smashing through them, man. That's like every episode. Between that and going, wow, 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 wow. That's like your like shtick at the moment.
Yeah.
I've thought about editing that shit out.
It's too much work.
Yeah, it's too much effort, man. I couldn't be bothered. So, this is episode number 27, and we're talking about what it takes to get a black belt. Why are we talking about that?
I guess it kind of came up because I just recently got my first degree on my black belt.
Just to clarify, first degree.
You're supposed to put the applause track in there, bro.
Oh, yeah. Clap, clap, clap.
This is completely off topic, but the fact
That's
you
not
said,
like us.
Yeah, the fact you said clap, I just heard yesterday like the an expression I've never heard before, and I thought was absolutely hilarious. You know, like sometimes it's, you know, when sometimes someone says a new expression or something, and you're just like, man, that's gold. Like, I'm going to use that. It's really good. And it was actually talking about, so just to give everyone some context, you know, it's come up briefly before that Kieren and I don't mind playing the odd video game, right? And probably even more so during lockdown. But it came up just before we were talking about these two games, Dota and League of Legends. It doesn't matter. They're two similar games, right? You don't need to know much about them, but they're two very similar games, right? And I was talking to this guy, and he plays one, he calls Dota, and I said something like, you know, oh, yeah, you should reinstall League of Legends. And he goes, oh, man, I would rather shit in my hand and clap than play League of Legends. And I was like, well, I've never heard that before.
That's good.
I thought that was so good.
That's so gold.
There's actually quite a few funny expressions in Portuguese that refer to shitting. Like there's one that is and I guess it's kind of similar in English. I guess it has the word shit. I guess because the translation would be when you don't give a shit. In Portuguese, you say like you're taking a shit while walking. You know? You're like, fuck it, bro, I don't care.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's another one that's quite funny, which is to say kind of, you know, if someone's in your way, you know how, imagine if someone is like, I don't know, it could be someone cock blocking you or someone who is like in your way but not utilizing the space that they're occupying. You'll say to them either take a shit or get out from behind the bush. So kind of like imagine if someone, if you've gone camping and someone's squatting behind the shit bush or something, but they're actually not taking a shit. You're like, dude, either take a shit or move. I need to use it.
Yeah, I need to take a shit. My needs are greater than yours. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, shit, clapping, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, going back to jiu-jitsu, I got my first degree, which, you know, we'll go into what that means, a first degree. But yeah, a few people actually, I could tell by people who had commented on the Instagram post I did or Facebook or whatever, had assumed just from their comment, I could tell that they thought that I got my black belt. You know? And even some of my close friends were like, oh, so, you know, is like black belt and first degree different? Because I know that in some martial arts, like when you get your black belt, it's just automatically like, you know, the beginning is a first degree black belt, right? Whereas in jiu-jitsu, it's black belt, nothing, right? Just a black belt, not just a black belt, but black belt.
Say it out is, bro. You're just a black belt.
Yeah. It's black belt.
We were similar level. Yeah. Now there is more of a separation.
Yeah,
between
that's
us.
true.
Let's be real.
Yeah, there's a piece of white tape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
So in jiu-jitsu, it's black belt and then your degrees. So I could tell some people, even my mum messaged me, she was like, what's with that? I thought you already had what? I'm like,
pretending?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, they're onto me. Crap. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about, what it takes to get your black belt, first degree black belts, and just, you know, we'll go into a little bit about the jiu-jitsu ranking system as a whole.
Straight in. Let's dive straight in. So, from my understanding, and just to fill those in that aren't in the know, it takes, well, this is debatable, and let's talk about how long it takes to get a black belt. However, once you receive your black belt, every degree after that is essentially an automatic process after every 5 years.
No. Yes. No. So the first, you're more or less right. Once you've gotten your black belt in jiu-jitsu, one thing it's worth noting that when we're talking about the ranking system, we're really referring to the IBJJF ranking system. That's the most widely accepted ranking system. But if you listen to our last episode, I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole of what we spoke about last episode, but we spoke about gi versus no gi and them becoming different sports, and that they should have a governing body that sort of the buck stops with that person. Well, it's essentially, at least in gi jiu-jitsu, the buck stops with the IBJJF, but at the same time, it is just an organization. So what I mean by that is when we talk about the requirements, most people follow the IBJJF system, but that's not to say that if someone didn't follow the IBJJF system, and said they were a black belt, or, they were given a black belt from whoever, would they still be a credible black belt? Yeah. There's no organization to say they're not, right? Because there isn't an official governing body, right? Anyway, so when you get your black belt in jiu-jitsu, your degrees, they become automated to some extent from the IBJJF. So once you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you're no longer awarded your degrees from your coach. You'll see coaches put them on the students. Like, you'll see a ceremony where the coach puts the third degree on their student's belt, right? Their third black belt degree on the student's belt. But it's just like a formality for the ceremony, right? For the grading. It actually just comes from the IBJJF. And depending on what degree, depends on how long. So, for example, your first 2 degrees are 3 years apart, right? So the fact that I got my first degree like last month or whatever means I've been a black belt for 3 years. In another 3 years, I'll get my second degree. And then I believe from that, let me just bring it up and double check. Then it starts to go in 5-year increments. Right. But they also have certain like age requirements as well.
Really?
Well, like once you get up to like red and black belt or coral belt, it's called, like that, you have to be a minimum of 50 years old, I believe, to receive that belt.
Okay.
To give you an idea, the minimum time at black belt before you can go to red and black belt is 31 years. So even back when I first started training with Fabio, what was he? I think he was already a 4th degree when I started training with Fabio. But even back then, when Fabio would get a stripe, which wasn't very often because it's every like 5 or, I think it's after your secondary degree. I believe it's every 5 years.
So you would have only seen him get one then?
I was there for one. Yeah, I think he got his 5th degree at the same grading he gave me my purple belt, I think.
Cool.
And then I don't think I was there for any other of his degrees from memory. Yeah, but obviously they don't come up very often, right? And even back then, when IBJJF was more relevant than it is today, we've spoken about it potentially becoming less relevant. Even back then, Fabio would say, well, really the only thing that degrees mean is that you're getting old, right? Like that's what he would say. And, to some extent, I agree with that, but it also, because you can nowadays with the explosion of jiu-jitsu, you can have a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt who's, when it comes to competing in jiu-jitsu, beyond the level of a 5th degree black belt, right? But I guess at the same time, it does show a certain level of experience, right? Opposed to, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean like, oh, wow, that dude's a 4th degree black belt, like he must know a lot. But at the same time, it does mean, oh man, like that tells you that dude's been a black belt for like over a decade or something. Like he's been training a long time.
I mean, if I saw a 4th degree black belt, I would expect them to know a lot. If they didn't, I'd be confused.
You would, yeah. I think the risk becomes, and I think this is, well, I guess with anything that constantly that you have to constantly learn and educate. I guess the risk is, have they worked to stay current?
Yeah, that's a lead-up question I wanted to ask. So because this system is automatic, right? And then I'm going to take a leaf out of your book and use an analogy.
Do it, bro.
So in Australia, when you get your motorbike license, if you're over the age of 25, once you get your red Ps, which is like beyond learners, it's the next one after like your learner license, then automatically, even if you don't ride a motorbike, you get your full license after 12 months of having your red Ps. You just have to get your red Ps, do the test, and then you automatically get your full license.
Right.
I'm assuming because it's run more or less automatically through a system like IBJJF, if you are registered under IBJJF and you've met like the certain criteria, because I know you had to do a rules course to get your first degree. And I'm not sure if there's any other hoops you got to jump through for the other degrees, but more or less, once you receive your black belt recognized under IBJJF, you'll just keep getting the certificates in the mail, even if you don't train?
Yes and no, yeah.
It's a little bit random.
No,
anyone would do this.
No, but I get what you mean, right? Like, someone could just phone it in, and, they could
maybe train
and be like, oh, I'm a 5th degree. It's like, dude, you threw out your gis 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes and no, right? So that's why it's kind of, well, on the one hand, it's trivial, and they don't mean anything. But on the other hand, it does show some experience and blah, blah, blah. Because, you've got to jump through a few little hoops. And these hoops are only important to jump through if you want to be recognized by IBJJF. For me, as an instructor and a gym owner, IBJJF is still relevant, right? So it's important for me to be recognized by them because they're super, super strict on the timelines of your belts and things like that. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're someone who's been a black belt for 10 years already, and an active black belt, successful competitor, maybe not a world champion or anything, but you've never really fought in IBJJF stuff or, but you've been a black belt for 10 years. And then you decide, man, actually, I want to go fight in the IBJJF Worlds, right? All of a sudden, you've decided you want to do an IBJJF competition. And you go try register for because you need to have an IBJJF membership to be able to enroll in the competitions, to register for the competitions.
To get a membership, you need to be recognized by someone that's already in IBJJF?
Yes, but even then, they have zero wiggle room. So let's say for me, for example, right? Fabio grew up training with more or less the guys who run IBJJF, right? Like he knows them personally. He could pick up the phone and call them, right? But even in that case, let's say I had never had any paperwork with IBJJF and all of a sudden I go to register as a black belt, they're going to go, nah, dude, we have zero history. Like there's zero documentation proving that you were previously a brown belt, purple belt, blue belt, like what do you mean you're a black belt? And they'll be like, no, ask Fabio. And even Fabio could hypothetically call them and be like, no, man, I promise you, he's one of my students. I gave him his black belt, blah, blah, blah. And they'll go, nah, dude, like without the documentation, because they kind of had to put a line somewhere because there was a period of time where people were just kind of, just signing certificates saying they were registering as a black belt and they weren't a black belt, right? And so that's then trickled down to now. It's even hard to register as a brown belt if you don't have any previous registrations with the IBJJF, because what will happen is there's minimum time requirements at each belt, right? As per IBJJF, which is there's 0 minimum time at white belt, right?
And it's like 2 years for blue belt.
Yeah, minimum of 2 years at blue, 1.5 at purple, and 1 year at brown.
Brown, yeah.
So then that's trickled down even more that now it's difficult to register as a brown belt if you have zero paperwork. Because then what people started doing is they would be like, okay, well, I'll just register as a brown belt. All I've got to do is wait a year. And then I can register as a black belt. IBJJF will see my history. Oh, he was a brown belt a year ago. He can now be a black belt. So yeah, so these hoops, you kind of do need to jump through them if you want to be recognized by the IBJJF, right? And if you want to, unfortunately, if you want to compete under their competitions, this is what you have to do, right? And like you said, you do need to have someone sign for you as well. So you need to have someone who is recognized by the IBJJF to sign your paperwork to say, yes, you know. So for example, for you, if you wanted to do your IBJJF membership, I could hypothetically sign it, but in your case, because you fall under Alliance, it's a bigger team that only the 3 founders of Alliance sign it. But more or less, it would come to me, and I would send it to them, and Fabio would be like, "Oh, that's one of Adam's students," and he would sign it. Right, and that would grant you your membership because Fabio's.
So is this something that you recommend people do? Because I don't think I'm registered under IBJJF.
No. So I mean, at white belt or even blue belt, it's maybe not super necessary. But then again, I would say if you're someone who thinks that it might be useful for you to have your IBJJF requirements one day, I would say register at blue belt at least so you start the paper trail.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking because I'm someone that I plan on getting a black belt. Like that's something I want to do. Yeah. And not everyone, starts jiu-jitsu with the plan to get a black belt, but I'm in a position where it's something that I want to do. Therefore, I'm just thinking back on what you said, like, you need a paper trail and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I have a competition paper trail with other organizations like New South Wales, BJJF, but it's not the same shit.
Yeah, but exactly. They won't care.
Yeah.
So, like I think, because then even if you do your blue belt registration and you don't do another registration until black belt, I'm not sure where the IBJJF stance is on a situation like that, but at least you could be like, well, look, man, you can see that 10 years ago I was a blue belt. So, there's been enough time for me to do the minimum time at each belt, you want to start the paper trail.
So with the minimum with the minimum time at each belt, in theory, hypothetically, someone could walk into a jiu-jitsu gym and in 5 years could be a black belt.
Yeah.
I counted 6 months for white belt, 2 years for blue belt, 1.5 years for purple, and a year for brown. 5 years and you're effectively
you could belt. Yeah, you could hypothetically.
What would it take to do that? Okay, I know that every gym is different, and I know we've spoken in the past about some gyms that utilize certain belts to buy their students. Like some gyms will, no matter what, you'll get a blue belt after like 12 months or whatever. And whereas some gyms, it takes you 12 months to get your first stripe, which I think is a bit ridiculous personally, but
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to give, a final answer because like you said, every gym's different.
But in your opinion, for someone to get is it possible to get a black belt from yourself in 5 years?
No. I mean, well, yes, but no. I'll give you an example. I mean, for me, I'm obviously always going to try uphold the standards that I was held to, which was super high, right? The only people that kind of Fabio graded that quickly were like someone who, white belt or well, actually, let's not say white belt because worlds at white belt is not considered worlds, right? So let's say blue belt is 1 year they would win worlds at blue belt. Then the next year they would win it at purple belt. Then the next year at brown, so it was essentially like every year this person was already winning worlds.
They were the best. They were considered the best in the world at their belt.
Yeah. So they were sort of the only people that Fabio graded at that, incredibly fast rate. But at the same time, there's other students that he didn't. For example, there's 2 of Fabio's students, but one in particular better known, his name's Lel Nogueira, more or less retired from competition now. He's now like the head coach out of the Alliance in Atlanta, which is Jacare's old gym. And Leo and I used to train together a lot. He's a big dude. He's the guy who invented the São Paulo pass. If anyone's heard of that way to pass close guard, it's called the São Paulo pass.
No, can you describe that?
It's a pass from close guard that's kind of counterintuitive because you have zero posture and you you get an underhook as if you were like passing half guard. You kind of get an underhook and then you reach back to open their legs, kind of like you're going to put yourself in a triangle or an omoplata, but it opens their closed guard and you go to half and then pass from half. So Lau, he was, how many times did he win worlds at black belt? I can't remember. He's like 2 or 3 time world champion at black belt, but he won worlds at brown as well. And typically you'd think like, man, this dude won worlds at brown belt, give him his black belt. And Fabio was like, nah, you got to win it again next year at brown before he got his black belt.
Shit.
So
is that sandbagging?
I don't know, maybe, but also I've never seen Fabio as a sandbagger, but Fabio has been one of the things that helped take Alliance to so many world titles. He's very strategic about how the team as a whole was structured to win worlds, because when you fight at worlds, the team's points are accumulated from blue belt to black belt. So someone who wins worlds at, black belt heavyweight scores the same amount of points for the team as a blue belt who wins worlds, right? Because they're just considered adult competitors. So often what would happen is, let's say you and I were the same weight division, but, I'm a blue belt and you're a purple belt, but we're the same weight division. And, there's kind of, I may be ready for my purple belt, but leading into the worlds, there's kind of no other Alliance member in the blue belt division, in the heavyweight blue belt division, and you're already in the purple belt heavyweight division. Like Fabio would look at that and think, well, why am I going to put Adam and Kieren in the same division, right? Why am I going to give him his purple belt and put him up there? Adam and Kieren will be in the same division. It's better to keep Adam in blue belt so, he can fight, he can score points that way, right? And it's not like he would sandbag and hold people for years, but just going into the worlds, which obviously only happens once a year, that would play into his decision-making, right? Which I don't consider that sandbagging. I just consider that, strategically structuring your team. I mean, if you want to talk about sandbagging, like AOJ are the guys who are famous for...
AOJ?
Yeah, Art of Jiu Jitsu, the Mendez brothers. They're the guys who are famous for like having, like, dude, that guy's been a blue belt for 12 years. But...
Man, from the side of the student, I mean, it's all well and good. Like if you, in my opinion, if I was a legitimate blue belt and I won some competition, whatever, like even the Australian titles or something like that, Australian Open, doesn't matter what it is, I'd be, proud, right?
Yeah.
But if I'd been a blue belt for 5 years and I should be, at that point, a senior purple belt and I win, I'm kind of, it's a purple belt versus blue belts. It doesn't make sense. It's
not like he would ever hold someone for long enough.
Like the AOJ guys.
That's
a bit
for sure. Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like, why would you be proud of that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just making a passing comment on what people say online. I mean, I don't know the Mendez brothers personally. I've never been and trained there.
Sounds like a call out, my dude.
I could take them. They're pretty little, bro. No, they're far superior to me, the Mendez brothers. But, I don't know. I don't think of it as sandbagging, but yeah, going back to the question that you asked, what feels like 20 minutes ago, what would it take for someone to get that? Hypothetically, you could get a black belt in 5 years.
Yeah.
Would I give a black belt to someone in 5 years?
Yeah.
They would have to be someone who's operating at that level, But it kind of does make me. I'm really torn about the whole belt system. There's something really special about having a black belt or earning your belts, and for some people it might be the golden title as to why they got into martial arts in the first place. That maybe they watched some cool kung fu movies or whatever, which may seem sort of far-fetched nowadays, but if you think back, a lot of the old school jiu-jitsu guys got into it because they watched a Bruce Lee movie or whatever, and this status of being a black belt. So it's definitely my biggest achievement in my life. biggest professional achievement. I would say, my family's probably the biggest achievement, but, my black belt and owning a gym and stuff, like it's something I'm really proud of. And for me, it's really important. But I do also think like we spoke about last episode and gi versus no gi and the separation, I don't know what the answer is, because belts are a good way to separate skill levels, so to speak. Because if there were no belts, you don't want to go in, register for a competition and, unbeknownst to you, you're fighting against a guy who is, like a 3rd degree black belt or something, because you don't know.
Take him.
Yeah. But, you at the same time, you also do look at guys who, in the no-gi scene, who recently fought on who's number one a few weeks back now by the time people are listening to this. But obviously the Hudalo brothers won, Kolabati, a 15-year-old, won in his fights.
Belt, yeah.
So it does make you think, well, should jiu-jitsu take more of an approach like boxing or Muay Thai or something, where there's
open?
Yeah, there's no belts. It's just, obviously you still have weight divisions and things like that, but are there no belts? It's just, well, if you're good enough, I
think having a competition with an absolute category that was absolute across belts would be interesting. I mean, that's something I would be interested. Look,
but then again, I mean,
just be dominated by black belts, though. You would imagine eventually, without having the outliers. Like, in my opinion, someone like Cole, he's an outlier. I mean, I've said to you that I said this to you off air, but I've been following that kid for a little while, and he's on the next level. Like, he is a prodigy in the making. Like,
he unfortunately just has a very punchable looking face, doesn't he? Don't you reckon? Like,
I'll leave that one to you, but I get what you're saying.
You don't want to say it in case one day
you said this to me, and
I don't know why. He's just got a face that you're like, I could punch you.
I
mean, I know that makes me
evil. You want to punch a 15-year-old?
It makes me sound like a prick, but
you are a prick.
I don't know. Like, I've never met the kid, but
I have a theory as to why you find him so punchable, and it's because he's young but very confident.
No, I
think that.
I'm going to disagree, because I actually don't really follow him at all. I know next to nothing about him, but just like if I just see a photo of him, I'm like even before I knew who he was.
Do you have that feeling when you see photos of like babies? You're like, no, I want to punch that baby.
No, but it's definitely came across my mind the first time you walked into the gym. I was like, this dude, punchable.
Fucking swing.
But if jiu-jitsu went that way, I don't know a lot about how the boxing circuit or the Muay Thai circuit works. But let's say hypothetically they did away with belts altogether. Well, then obviously there needs to be a system in place for you to progress to the higher ranks. Like, you can't just be a year into jiu-jitsu and be like, cool, and go register for a professional fight. The same way that you can't as a boxer. You have to work your way through the amateur scene. And I actually don't even know what has to happen until you say, I'm a professional boxer, like whether that's through sponsorship or do you have to make it onto a certain card? I actually don't know, right? But, and MMA is kind of the same, right? You need to put in the work and essentially be scouted, right? Or be annoying on social media and then make it into the UFC or ONE FC or whatever these. So if they were to do away with belts, there does need to be, I guess, some type of way that people can make it through, as well as just for safety reasons. I know jiu-jitsu doesn't have striking, but
This can still be dangerous.
It can still be dangerous, right? Like, for both parties, if you ask any experienced jiu-jitsu practitioner, and they'll tell you that majority of injuries come from for lack of a better term, like a spazzy white belt.
It's like that meme that I posted on our Instagram yesterday.
Yeah, with the goosebumps.
Yeah.
It would be a bit old now. People would be like, what, meme, huh? Just because it'd be so long ago by the time they're listening to this.
It's essentially like it was a meme template where the premise of the meme is the white belt saying how many upper belts they've injured, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And they're a spazzy white belt. But
yeah.
It's hard to explain a meme verbally.
That's right. Yeah, because, if it's kind of like when again, something from our social media, probably the best reel you've posted, where I was saying I don't like drilling with lower belts because they don't move the way you want to.
Yeah.
You know, and same from a competitive level. Like if you're a high level competitor and then you've got some, you know, let's not call them a spazzy white belt, but maybe just a
spazzy black belt.
You know, or just a run of the mill blue belt or something. You know, not a Colabate, just a run of the mill blue belt. Man, like they might do something that you wouldn't expect them to do, and that would be incredibly dangerous, right? You know, maybe let's look at jumping close guard, which by most rules aren't allowed until blue belt and up. Why? Because white belts tend to jump and land on people's legs and break their knees in half.
Or even take different, like a knee bar is not allowed till brown belt, or like, you know, heel hooks are not allowed until brown belt.
Yes, yeah.
Things like that. And there's reasons why those movements aren't allowed, is because they're very dangerous. Yesterday I was on Reddit and I saw a video. I'm not sure how old it is, but there was a competition in the States somewhere, and there was a no-gi match, and one of the competitors had a single leg and the other competitor tried to do a scissor sweep and just jumped into the side of this guy's leg and just snapped it in half.
Yeah.
And it's,
brutal.
Man, it was nasty. And he was kind of like shrugging his shoulders, throwing his hands up like, oh, what happened? But like he fucked up the scissor sweep and
scissor sweep or a scissor takedown?
Scissor takedown, sorry. A scissor takedown.
Which for most rule sets is you're not allowed to do a scissor takedown, right?
Yeah.
It's like jumping
reason.
close guard on steroids.
Exactly.
It's super
you
dangerous.
literally jump, and if you fuck it up, guess what happens? You jump on side of his leg and snap it. And this is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I don't know.
On the flip side, though, like last ADCC, Gary Tonin took out Edward Najimi with the most epic scissor takedown into a heel hook.
Yeah, but this guy definitely was not Gary
But,
Tonin.
you know, that's high-level guys, right? You know,
yeah, exactly. And you've spoken
this-
about that in the past. Like they've signed the dotted line. They, you know, you spoke about it in the context of tapping. Like they are not going to pull their punches. If they get a submission, they're going to reef it on.
Yeah,
and it is your responsibility to tap quick enough so that I don't fucking break your arm.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same sort of story. But
beating the same old drum, I always, you know, because it's a sport I follow, I always, you know, often
Formula One.
talk about Formula One, and you know, man, there's a reason that they can be, you know, 5 centimeters behind the car in front, nose to tail at 300 kilometers an hour, because they know the dude in front won't brake until he reaches the braking marker before the corner, right? Whereas if it was just some, you know, less experienced driver, like he's not gonna operate, and then that all of a sudden that makes the whole scenario unsafe.
Exactly.
Obviously, that's way more dangerous than what we're talking about. But you know, it's back to how I said, if they were to do away with belts altogether, there needs to be some way that people work their way through the system to make it into the
totally
professional leagues. And conversely, if I were look back as a white belt or a blue belt, I wouldn't have wanted to register for a competition where I could have been going up against whatever belt. Even now, I have white belt students who go to compete and they get stressed because, you know, they've got 1 stripe and that other white belt they're fighting has 4.
Not matter.
You know, and that's something that's even irrelevant, let alone if it was, okay, that dude's actually a brown belt.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, fuck. My first comp, I was a 2-stripe, and my first match was a 4-stripe and looked like a senior 4-stripe. I followed him on Instagram. He got promoted like a few weeks later. Not trying to toot my own horn, but it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant. Like
I say that to everyone because stripes are even more trivial than belts.
Because every gym does stripes differently.
Yeah, and there's no, like, unless IBJJF have updated their website or something, I don't believe they have any guidelines for stripes. So
because they're not a recognized thing. They're allowed. Like you're allowed to, obviously, like you're allowed to do what the fuck you want. And there's certain this is my understanding. So if you know otherwise, correct me out there in the comments or whatever, or yourself, Adam. But like the only policy there is recommendation that it's 4 stripes per belt.
Yes,
that's the only really thing out there. Like it can take you, you know, you can get your first stripe on the first day if you wanted, or you can get all 4 in one day. Yeah. Like it doesn't fucking matter because stripes, they're not a legitimate thing. It's not like a degree on a black belt where you get a certificate.
Yeah.
It's literally, you know, under your coach's discretion, they give you some tape on your belt to show progression within the belt. And the reason they implemented them is to retain students, particularly for blue belt. So I've heard of some gyms that only award stripes at blue belt. I've heard of some gyms that don't award any stripes at all. But I just wanted to rewind slightly to the point you made about what would happen if they removed belts from jiu-jitsu altogether, how it would structure the competitive scene. I'd argue that if they removed belts from jiu-jitsu, you would have significantly less people joining jiu-jitsu. I think that for some people...
you would have your retention would be lower.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Maybe not less people... I mean, yeah, you would probably have some less people joining because there's just not that whole like,
people
I want a black belt.
People would not stick around, dude. Yeah.
I don't think it would change in terms of numbers in the gym. It wouldn't change the numbers of competitors you have because people who are, heart and soul competitors, they kind of they couldn't care less about belts, right?
I don't give a fuck about belts. Well, to a certain extent. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Like I still want to progress.
Yeah, but I know what you mean, right?
But the color of the belt, like, man, I would.
A competitor someone who's a competitor to their bone, they just want to compete against the best people in the world, right? So if anything, they probably don't want belts because they would just want to from day one go fight other black belts or whatever, right? But yeah, for the average person, if you were to get rid of belts, because then you're taking away, the stripes were implemented to help people see some sort of progression.
So imagine if you take away stripes, let alone belts, fuck. Right?
So, but then what if, like we spoke about last episode, the sports go separate directions. Like and then in no-gi, what if they do away with belts altogether? Like how are people going to, I don't know how they do it.
I don't think they would. I think that's one tradition they would keep. Just look at belts being awarded in no-gi. They don't wear a gi. They just hand them the belt. It's ceremonial, right? And it's brand new. They'll never wear it. It's literally a ceremonial thing. They hand them the fucking belt and then on their way. Like I saw Craig Jones in the States promoted one of his students to brown belt and he just, handed him a brand new brown belt in the packaging. Yeah. It's like, that's a tradition.
I mean, I would like to keep that tradition.
I would too.
If it fades off, let's keep it until after I'm dead or something.
Well, it's important because then there's certain rules depending on what, like IBJJF and a lot of organizations just mimic their rules, just take their rules, right? And even in no-gi, you have to wear a ranked rash guard. So you essentially are wearing your belt on your rash guard.
Well, right? In IBJJF comps, like not in, if you go do who's number one or something.
Oh, yeah, they don't give a shit. You can wear whatever the fuck you want.
Or whatever.
But all the competitions that I've done in the Sydney area follow the IBJJF rule set. And I was in the finals in my white belt no-gi and my competitor had like a black rash guard on and the ref, because there was cameras around and because it was the final, was like, oh, I got to go get some upper guidance here, and he had to go talk to the head organizer to see if it was okay. And I was like, oh fuck, what's going on?
Well, you
here?
often see it like the local competitions and stuff. You'll see in the white belt division just hundreds of dudes with their rash guards inside out because the ref would have said, no, you need a ranked rash guard. It needs to be white, or it needs to be, I think it's 30% of the rash guard needs to be the color of your belt. Yeah. And these dudes are wearing like all black rash guards or Craig Jones rash or whatever rash guard, right?
Subscribe to my OnlyFans rash guards.
Yeah. And then they end up and they just turn it. They just turn it inside out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, maybe it goes back to, the kind of human nature of wanting something tangible, when you...
It's a goal,
when you think about, Craig Jones awarding that brown belt and that guy will never use that belt. It's like, well, the same when you win a UFC title, you're never wearing that belt, bro.
Keep your pants up.
No, you want something tangible, right?
Yeah.
So
purely symbolic, really.
Yeah.
Like the belt itself probably worth, like the UFC belts, they're probably worth like, a couple $100 at most. It's, and you have to give it back if you lose. Like it's a purely symbolic thing.
Well, I think, like we were just saying, for the average person, I think it would really be detrimental to students' progression and for academies' retention.
If they did away with belts.
Yeah, and the lifespan of their students if they did away with belts. But but if they did, they would definitely have to it would only benefit, I think, the competitive scene, and they would need to have some structure in place for people to progress.
Well, I've
I don't know how it works in college for wrestling, because obviously wrestling doesn't have belts. If anyone, I know we do have some listeners from North America. If they know, if they want to chime in, I'm not sure.
They're like,
how.
North America, what's that?
Yeah,
we're talking about the United States.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, because I know the flashy title that gets thrown around is NCAA Division I wrestler. Right?
Yeah, they have. That's right. They have.
But
divisions.
it's like,
yeah,
okay, well, you
Division
can't
1,
just
Division
from
2,
day
Division
one
3.
register for Division I. Like, do you have to win Division 10? Is that the bottom, and you work your way up, and or do you have to accumulate a certain amount of points? But yeah, so even then, if that's the case, it's great for competitors.
It might be like okay. So I played rugby, school schoolboy rugby. You have A, B, C, or first, second, third, etc., or like the first 15 in rugby union, and they're selected by the based on performance. Some schools do like tryouts. Some tryouts, go for like the preseason. Some, just based on what you were last year, depending on the organization, the school, etc. But it's just selected by the coaches. But I mean, we're talking schoolboy sort of rugby, not like a more professional organization like college wrestling. It's a little bit like there's more money involved and, sponsorships from the school. So I suppose it's different. But I did have a question for you based on this topic that I've been wanting to ask you for a while. And basically, if I was to train 2 times per week, would I be able to progress in jiu-jitsu, or is training 2 times per week purely wasting my time?
From a business point of view, when it comes to taking your money, it's definitely not a waste of your time. You should man, yeah, a little bit, Twice a week is such a small amount. There's fortunately, but unfortunately, jiu-jitsu is just so complicated. It's so hard. Twice a week is just such a small amount of time to be doing it if you really want to progress and get good. And the standards are only getting higher by the day. Just one of the things that when I've got a new student and they'll be trying to learn how to invert, right? Even just like in a warm-up drill or whatever. And I often say to them, I'm like, man, back when I was a blue belt or a purple belt and bearing bolos came on the scene, these were movements that even current black belts didn't know how to do. Said, but now it's just normal. And that doesn't mean it's easy, but it's normal nowadays. Like, it's a beginner movement. It's a basic movement. But just because it's basic doesn't mean it's easy, right? And man, twice a week is just such a small amount, I think really.
Am I wasting my time, do you think?
I don't think, look, it's never wasted time. You're still going to be acquiring skills. And some people pick stuff up way quicker than others. So for some people, they might progress more training twice a week than the other dude who's training 5 times a week, because I don't know, that twice a week dude is just a natural, or, he previously did whatever other sport that complements it. I don't know. But it's such a small amount. I can tell you that statistically, the average person trains 2.5 times a week. So let's say the average person trains 2 or 3 times a week. So I guess if you want to look at that data, you could say, well, if you train twice a week, you're on the bottom end of average.
Okay.
So you will always be on the low end of average unless you're, incredibly talented and gifted. So if you're training 3 or 4 times a week, or, if you're training 3 times a week, cool, you're on the upper end of average. So you got to be training 4 times a week just to say like, oh, I train a tiny bit more than the average Joe. So if you want to be getting good and progressing.
And when we say times, let's just define that term really quick. So if someone like myself, if I do 4 days per week and I'm doing back-to-back classes, do you consider that 4 times per week?
Yeah. So, at our gym, we have, we have a class that runs 5:30 till 6:30 and then a class that runs 6:30 till 8. So we often have students just do both those classes back to back, because the 5:30 class is a little lighter. even though that on the timetable that's going to record that you train twice, I see that as you training once. You know, for me, I think this. Imagine it the same as weightlifting. I see one training session is, you know, do you need to recover before you can go again? If the answer is yes, then you've done a training session. If the answer is no, then it's the same workout. You know, like that's how I see, you know, training.
Okay, this leads me on to...
So for me, I used to train 7 in the morning, and then I would, you know, do some weights and drill, but then my next like training session was at 12, like a competition class. Could I have done those classes back to back? Like, no way. Like after that morning class, I needed to eat. I needed to, you know, I would often take a nap on the mats or whatever, and then go again at the 12 o'clock class, you know? So I see that as 2 different sessions because I needed to recover from one before I could do the second one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas if you're just doing them back to back, it's just, you've just done 1 2.5 hour session, which for some people might seem long, but I mean, yeah, I used to do an hour and a half to 2 hours at 7 in the morning. And then that 12 o'clock session was another 2 hours, and sometimes it was 2.5 hours. So for me, even a 2.5 hour class was sometimes just, well, that's just like one workout session.
Okay.
I mean, you would know as a previous bodybuilder, sometimes you would spend how long for
3
a
hours
workout
a day.
session?
3 hours.
Right? For the one session, right?
Yeah, so 2 hours of weights, or like 2 hours including warm up and then an hour of cardio after it. And that was when I was in the peak.
And did you consider that one workout or 2? One workout, right?
Yeah, I suppose it was one workout.
you would probably
sometimes I broke it up.
You would maybe broke it up on your regime in terms of like the muscle groups you were working on and everything, but it was like the one workout. It
was one session, just a long fuck off session. Yeah.
So for me, unfortunately for the listeners here who are students of mine being like, what? But I'm like cranking, I've done like 50 classes. Nah, you done 25, bro.
Yeah.
You know, they're just like, you've just done 25, 2.5 hour classes. That's how I see it.
Yep.
When, you know.
Okay. So what about, I have, this question is a, it's been asked before on other places around the jiu-jitsu world. What about the comments that will come back and say, but I can't recover enough? Like 2 sessions per week is my max. If I did any more, I wouldn't be able to walk. I'd be crippled. I cannot physically recover for whatever reason. What do you say to that?
Advise they find a nice GP and get to the bottom of what's wrong with them. Yeah. That's just such a garbage excuse. I mean, obviously for some people that would be a legitimate excuse because, man, all types of people train. You know, is the person saying that a guy who works 80 hours a week at his own law firm and has 3 kids and blah, 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 that might be the case, right? And if that's the case, like, man, okay, that dude's got a lot. I'm impressed to see that you're here whatsoever.
So what's the ceiling for someone that trains 2 times a week? Where do you see them, like, where's their skill cap? Because you did say that, look, honestly, you're probably not going to progress past a certain point. Where's that point?
Oh, man.
I'm laying on thick with these hard questions here. I had this pre-planned.
I know the answer. They're just maybe not.
Say it.
They're just maybe not answers I want to publicly say.
Just say it.
This episode will release and we'll get all these emails of students.
They won't listen anyway.
Look, I mean, yeah. I think I try to keep really high standards. And I think for that person training twice a week it's worth noting that there might be some students I only see twice a week, but that doesn't mean they're not doing training or theory studying outside, right? We've spoken about that before, the importance of doing self-study, and that if the only time you did any jiu-jitsu or thought about jiu-jitsu was when you were at the gym, you're going to progress slowly. But yeah, so there's some people I might only see twice a week, and there are students I know of that I only see twice a week, but I know that they are putting in jiu-jitsu work 5-6 days a week, right? I know that, but I only see them twice a week because of logistical reasons, okay, because of their work life or whatever. But let's say if we're talking about the person who only interacts with jiu-jitsu twice a week, they train twice a week, they don't they're not really into watching YouTube videos, or they don't do any self-study, or they don't drill with one of their friends on the weekend or whatever. They just literally, as dry as it can be, train twice a week. Where do I see their ceiling? Oh man, like people want to see progression. So I don't want to say they would never pass blue belt, because if they train long enough, they will. But in terms of where would I see their ceiling from a technical point of view, I mean, man, a competent blue belt, I think, might be as far as it goes, really, because not only it would be different if jiu-jitsu and what you need to know in jiu-jitsu was finite, but it's not, right? So even if beginner gains, right? We've spoken multiple times about beginner gains. Everyone should know what that is by now. So you have that in jiu-jitsu too, but yeah, you get to a point where beginner gains don't exist anymore. And if you're only training, so let's say you train twice a week, and that could be enough for you to become like a staunch white belt and even a good blue belt. You're someone who's talented and whatever. But then if you're only training twice a week, you're just going to constantly get further and further behind the eight ball, because jiu-jitsu is progressing faster than twice a week. Do you know what I mean? That
makes perfect sense. Right? So you're basically saying if you train twice per week with beginner gains, because you're learning a new sport, you learn all the basics. You learn the basic, the foundational movements. You learn some submissions, some escapes, etc. You'll learn your two go-to moves in every position. And then following that, you may pick up a couple things here and there if you train long enough, but you're basically just fighting to maintain your skill set.
Yeah, and
you're treading water.
And you're probably just going to sink over, I know that can be a hard pill to swallow, but it's also what makes jiu-jitsu great. It's what makes America great. It's
cut.
Let's
try that one again.
It's one of the reasons that, people love jiu-jitsu. It's that it's never ending, and it's this constant pursuit of knowledge and the ability to develop. And
so what would you say to someone out there that's like, okay, probably not going to be any of our listeners, so you're not talking to anyone in particular, just humor me. What would you say to someone that wants to start jiu-jitsu but can only commit to 2 times per week?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, just start, because some people, when you get, bitten by the jiu-jitsu bug, your priorities may change, right? And that twice a week might turn into 6 times a week. For me, I had done martial arts before jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai and other sports. But when I started jiu-jitsu, I didn't actually start training till I was in Canada, when I was living in Canada. And I moved to Canada for visa reasons, but also to kind of do that typical Australia. For anyone listening who's not from Australia, it's, Australia and Canada, if you're under 30, have very favorable working visa terms. So it's very common for a lot of Australians to move to Canada to do the whole like working holiday, go to the snow sort of thing, right? Typically Vancouver and Whistler and all that. And so I went with that in mind. And then the whole, I was just shy of 2 years I lived in Canada. Man, I'm, could count on one hand the amount of times I went to Whistler or even to the local mountains in Vancouver, because whenever my friends would be like, man, let's go boarding, I'd be like, nah, I got to train. I was just so addicted to jiu-jitsu. It just took priority over everything, right? So if you can only commit to twice a week, just start, because your priorities might change. If they don't, does that mean you have to quit jiu-jitsu? No, man, but just be realistic. Yeah, just be realistic with yourself. I don't want to say, treading water is quite a grim way to think about it. No, you're still always going to be learning something new. Even if you're training 10 times a week, you're still learning something new. So there's still always value in learning, but you do have to be realistic. I used to have an old training partner, one of my friends from Canada, who used to get bummed that, he had started training before me, and I caught up to him and overtook him in terms of skills and abilities and competition success and things like that.
That's just because you're tall, though.
Yeah, that's right. It's because I got long legs. That's what everyone tells me. and he would get a bit bummed. And I was like, yeah, but man, like, okay, like I'm 10 years younger than you and I've gotten to, I've decided that jiu-jitsu is what I want to do. Whereas, you still train a decent amount, but, you're married and, you've got a super successful career. And I mean, they're different priorities.
Fat and slow. And where is he now?
Well, he's a black belt now, still lives in Canada training,
Made it.
So it's like the same as that person who starts training in their mid-30s. I mean, you can't compare yourself to a 19-year-old who wants to be a world champion, or even if you started in your mid-20s and now you're mid-30s, you got your black belt. Man, don't be upset if you get your ass kicked by that 19-year-old blue belt who wants to be a world champion. Like, the dude's 15 years younger than you. He's, training.
Breathe jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Like you can't make that comparison. So if you're someone who can only train twice a week and will only ever be able to train twice a week, that's fine. You can still train jiu-jitsu and you can still progress and, have fun. You'll still learn a lot. You just may not be on the cutting edge of jiu-jitsu.
And you may not.
But, maybe you don't want to be on the cutting edge of jiu-jitsu anyway. It can be exhausting to stay on the cutting edge of
anything, really.
Of anything,
yeah.
Some people don't want that constant pursuit and, essential like R&D of a project. So back to your question, if someone is like thinking about trying jiu-jitsu and they can only train twice a week, just do it, man. Your priorities might change. And if they don't, that's fine too. But just be realistic with, you're just delusional if you're going in thinking, I'm going to train twice a week. I'm only ever going to train twice a week and I'm going to become world champion. Man, that's just like retarded.
Yeah,
right? Like
would they make black belt?
Would they? Well, yeah, that's
Like
going
you said,
to
the
depend on the gym, right?
Yeah, the ceiling
would someone make black belt from me only training twice a week? Yeah, after like a couple of decades, right? It's going to take you a very long time, right? Yeah, like a really long time. If we look back at even stripes, right? So the way that I award stripes, and this is in line with...
Go on.
Yeah.
I already know this.
Yeah, so this is in line with the Alliance, the way that Alliance as a whole and how I learnt from Fabio how stripes are given.
Mm-hmm.
It's just based on attendance. And instantly some people listening will be like, whoa, hang on, what do you mean just based on attendance? So they don't mean anything? Oh, that's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. No, I'll tell you why, right? So stripes are awarded based on attendance, and that attendance number depends on your belt. So at white belt, it's every 30 classes, at blue belt, every 65, purple, 75, brown belt, 85, right? So it gets progressively harder. But at the same time, the minimum time requirement at those belts gets shorter, right? But so it kind of doesn't add up, right? So at blue belt, to get your 4 stripes within the minimum time period of blue belt, which is 2 years, right? Where you need 65 classes for each stripe, right? And you've got 2 years to do that 4 times, right? So to make 260 classes, I think that is. But then at brown belt, to do the minimum time, you've got 1 year and it's 85 classes per stripe. So like you'd have to train a lot more.
So at blue belt, let's just do the math real quick. So you need to do 260 classes to be awarded your purple belt in 2 years, right? So you have 52 times 2.
I just did 260 in my head. I ain't no mathematician.
No, it's one. Yeah, you were right. So it's 65.
260. Yeah. So, but that's to get your 4th stripe. But then,
then you need. And then it's based on skill for.
No, sorry.
Right?
So this is the way I do it, right?
Okay.
So you would need. It's
2.5 years.
You would need training 2 to 3 times a week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So train for the average person, but there's another 65 classes on top of that because you need your 4th stripe, right? And then you need another 65 classes to get to the so-and-so called 5th stripe, which would be the next belt.
Right.
Right.
So it's minimum 2.5 years.
Yeah, if you train 2 to 3
2
times.
to 3 times a week, yeah.
But if you imagine, let's go, so it's 5 times the number, right? So if we go to brown belt, let's say, so it's 5 times 85, right? That's 425, right? And then I don't know what calculation you did to get to the number, but you need 425 classes.
So what's the minimum time at the belt?
1 year.
1 year. So, oh shit. So you need to do 425 classes in a fucking year.
If you wanted to do it in the minimum.
So divide that by 52. That's eight classes, 8.1
classes a week.
a week. Yeah.
Right. So, why is this on attendance? Because there's just so much to learn, right? And think about it like this, right? There's a couple of reasons that we give stripes. One is to help motivate the student because it can be a long periods of time between belts, right?
Right.
Another reason that we base it on attendance is just to aid the instructor because as your gym grows, man, it can be hard to track individuals' belt progression, let alone their stripe progression, you know? And
so I have a question though on that. When we're talking about white to blue belt, you're not, how many classes was it? Like 25, you said?
30.
30 classes, right? So from white belt 4-stripe to blue belt, that's not going to be 30 classes though.
What do you mean?
So if I get be awarded the next belt up.
No, that's just a minimum. So
minimum, because I mean, I got my 4th stripe in March.
Yeah. So I was getting to that.
Yeah, sorry.
The other thing is to aid the instructor in keeping track because what happens, right? If you don't have this tool just to help the instructor, what happens is they go, oh man, oh geez, Kieren's been on that 1 stripe for freaking ages, man. Oh, he must be due for his 2nd stripe. And then I give you your 2nd stripe on your white belt and you're chuffed and blah, blah, blah. But then if I went back and looked in my, booking software and whatever tools you have to track your students' attendance, right? And I go, well, oh shit, Kieren's actually only done 4 classes in the last 6 months because whatever, because my gym's grown and I don't teach every class anymore and whatever. So it helps in that as well. But also the reason it's based on attendance is just no different to how sometimes unis or whatever is based on attendance. Like, let's look at here in something super relevant here in Australia, people who are here on like student visas, if they don't hit a certain amount of attendance in the class they're enrolled in, they lose their visa.
Yep.
Right? So it's that as well. So let's say white belt, right? You do your first 30 classes, you get your 1st stripe. Another 30, you get your 2nd. Another 30, you get your 3rd. Another 30, you get your 4th. So you got 4 stripes. You've done 120 classes. You do another 30 for your blue. So you've done 150 classes. Does that mean you're going to get your blue belt from me? No. It just tells me you have done the minimum amount you have attended the minimum required amount of classes for me to even ask myself the question, is that person ready for a blue belt? Right? So the same way, like a uni course might say, you need to attend 60% of the lectures, otherwise you fail, right?
So I actually did a video, funny, I do a video on everything. I did a video on this recently, and I was basically talking about, but based on everything you've told me, that there's effectively, in my view of the world, there's 3 different methods of awarding stripes. One is on attendance, one is on time, and the other is some boutique way of that specific niche gym. Say you only have like 30 students, then you'd probably award, each stripe individually based on, quality of jiu-jitsu or skill set, right? Yeah. Very uncommon. And I basically said that if you want to figure out which method your instructor uses, just base it between time from when you started to the 1st stripe to the 2nd stripe, and then by the 2nd stripe you'll be able to literally mathematically calculate when you get your 3rd and 4th.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, if they have some sort of system in place. Yeah. But man, I know plenty of gyms, and I would argue majority of gyms, they just do it kind of on a whim.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it's unfair to the student. It's super unfair to kids. Like kids need
structure. Well, they get like 5 or 6 stripes on their belts, right?
No, they still only get 4. But we do, for example, for the younger kids a 2nd set of stripes that have nothing to do with regular belt progression, but we have some colored stripes, and this is for little kids, and it's kind of their stripes they get on their belt, kind of the same how at school they might get like a sticker or something. It's just kind of like that. So they'll get, you know, a yellow stripe if they have good behavior. They get like a blue stripe if they treat their uniform correctly, as in like they've always got their uniform clean and they know how to tie their belt and things like that. But these stripes they can lose as well. So if they misbehave, they like will lose that yellow stripe off their belt, you know? So this is for little kids, right? It's just a tool to aid their behavior.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So these attendance stripes, I mean, and there's a lot to consider, man. Like, you know, I look at a competitor differently to the average person, because the average person, like you said, you looked at blue belt, it's going to take, for the average person training 2 or 3 times a week, it's going to take them 2.5 years to hit the minimum amount of classes needed before they're looked at for a purple belt.
Yep.
Whereas a competitor, man, like, you know, a competitor could hit that 4th stripe in a year, right? Because they're doing so many classes. It's like, okay, but you haven't even done the minimum time at blue belt yet. So of course it's not like in another 65 classes, you're going to get your purple.
Yeah.
You haven't even been a blue belt long enough yet. You know, so everyone is, and for me, everyone is treated on a case-by-case basis.
For belt promotion.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's no way you can, for me, if any of my students are listening, you can't rig the system, right? Because I look at all of you individually. The only constant, is that I require you to attend a minimum amount of classes. So if you're looking at me being like, dude, I have been a 4th stripe white belt forever, why don't I have my blue belt yet? I'm telling you, because you haven't even done 30 classes as a 4th stripe white belt yet. That's why. You know, or that may be why, right?
Yeah, I'm fucking with you now.
Yeah,
I was giving him weird looks.
Me a look, right? You know, that may be why. And that is the case. Like one particular student asked me, not as in he didn't ask that taboo thing about belts, but he was just asking in terms of like, oh, am I missing something? Is there something that you're wanting me to work on? Like, what do I need to do to get to that next level?
Playing with fire there, boy.
Yeah, is what he asked. And, you know, he asked it in a very polite, well-educated way. He was just saying, yeah, what do I need to do to get to that next level? And I was like, I essentially said to him, man, you haven't even done the minimum amount of classes. You haven't even turned up to the minimum amount of lectures that you need to turn up to, you know, for you to pass this course, right? So, you know, that's how I deal with stripes and how Alliance their teaching methodology deals with stripes. But yeah, it's not a pay to win, right? It's just telling me that, you know, that with all the data and all the the 30 years that Fabio and Jacare and Gigi have put this all together, they've kind of come as a whole to this sort of, okay, these are the more or less the numbers and classes that people need to be hitting to, you know, have accumulated enough knowledge to be at that level. But, you know, it's just a guideline. It's case by case, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well,
your case is a unique one, Kieren. It's
I'm never getting promoted. Sandbag.
Yeah. But, you know, to bring it back to where we started at the episode of my first degree and stuff, it's, you know, yeah, I'm proud of it, but it was also just some hoops I had to jump through, and I did it just to be recognized by IBJJF. It's important for me as an instructor and a gym owner, because if I have students wanting to compete for IBJJF and they'll need their instructor to be registered with them, because man, there's dudes on the scene now who are black belts and more successful than me competitively and whatever, who would not even be a first degree black belt by IBJJF, or maybe not even be in a black belt as far as IBJJF is concerned, just because they didn't jump through the hoops. But does that mean they're not a black belt? No, not at all. Like, for example, there'd be plenty of no-gi / like 10th Planet guys who were black belts and fighting on who's number one and ADCC and whatever else, and whatever other competition, just not fighting in IBJJF competitions because they wouldn't have the paperwork for it. But it doesn't mean they're not a black belt. And until, like we said last episode, until there's some governing body that the buck stops with and is the official international, organization for the sport, IBJJF is just an organization. And,
yeah, that makes sense.
I paid my fees and did my rules course and whatever to get my degree. And, you kind of have to do it for every degree. But yeah, anyway, I get to put some stripe on my belt, or I wait until I see Fabio and he puts it on me for the ceremonial factor. But with COVID and international travel, that might not happen for years. So
yeah,
I'll probably end up just.
You might put the second one on, yeah?
He might put the second one on, yeah. I remember, when he got his 5th degree, when I got my purple belt, like Jacare, Fabio's coach, he wasn't there. He had I can't remember if it was like a live, or Zoom didn't exist back then. Yeah. I don't know if it was a live Skype call or if it was just a pre-recording, but he had like a projector and he had a video from Jacare, but yeah, it all just took place in Fabio's gym. And I can't remember, I think he got one of his students to physically put the stripe on, or maybe he had already had it put on, but it wasn't like it actually came from Jacare.
Came from IBJJF.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. I think that's a good place to leave it. But yeah, thanks for listening. If you're listening for this long to the podcast,
it was a bit of a longer episode.
Yeah, hopefully you learned something, because I certainly learned a lot. I learned how to rig Adam's promotion system. So I was taking notes. I'll be publishing that in an ebook for all Sydney Jiu-Jitsu practitioners out of Alliance, and it's reasonably priced at $9.99 if you want to buy how to get your blue belt. Anyway, so thanks for listening. Feel free to follow us on your streaming platform of choice. We're all across the internet these days. And if you want to support the show even further, jump over to our Instagram, which is @BeyondJujitsu_podcast. And we're going to have another Q&A episode very soon. If you're listening to this, get your questions in pretty quick, because we do record 2 weeks ahead. And that is coming very shortly. So if you have a question,
it'll be episode 30, right?
Yeah. So if you have a question that you want to ask either myself or Adam, you can do that via our form that's on our Instagram page. So just click the link in our Instagram and you'll be able to find that very easily. But until next time, guys, thanks for listening.
Have a good one.
See you later.